I think I am.
I think you are.
All right. Well, greetings, Warzone kids, is my customary greeting. We have I have Elizabeth Clements on the with us. She's the founder of Hidden Water, and I'm super happy that you took the time, Elizabeth. Thank you very much. It's a real treat.
Yeah, thanks for inviting me. Appreciate it.
Well, why don't you just like tell me about Hidden Water. It's been a while since I heard the spiel from you. Tell me about Hidden Water. What's it all about?
Yeah, well, it's a restorative justice response to child sexual abuse. And the beginning, the origin story is that I've been a social worker and a mediator for a long time, and I ran the community mediation centers in Brooklyn and Manhattan for 7 years. And we used to get cases that had to do with all kinds of things. But if you got deep enough into the case, the conflict, it would often reveal child sexual abuse somewhere in there. And that at the root of a lot of these problems was even decades later, systems not facing the harm that people had gone through. And so and it didn't really work out in mediation very well because the non-offending parent would continue to do, the deny, deflect, minimize, justify, blame the victim kind of thing. The victim would continue to be really upset and cause a lot of, upset in the family and, just the kind of dynamics that that I'm very familiar with now. And so I went looking for a different way to intervene, realizing that families are not managing the conflicts that come out of child sexual abuse very well. And that's when we found restorative justice and Kay Pranis, who taught us about circle. And then it just has unfolded since then. We figured out that we needed to put each of the family members in different circles so that they could learn and understand the way they were impacting the system and have be safe to have the conversations they needed to have in order to evolve their perspective, including the people who were harmed, including the people who caused harm. Non-offending parents are a big contributor of pain to family systems. And then often the what we call the blue, but the spouses and the siblings and the adult children, they often get sidelined when they can actually be a really important stabilizing influence on a family. So yeah, so we started to address the system in this way, and it's been working. We just opened our registration for the circles on Monday, and it was full in 2 hours.
Yeah, I'll put a link to that
Yeah,
in
so
the
obviously
description.
it's there. We're meeting a need, a gap in services somewhere. Yeah.
Yeah. Um, so you mentioned different colors. You said blue. Um, tell us about the different colors. How many colors are there and what do they mean? Who are they for? I pay a lot of
Yeah.
attention to the green ones because that's the ones I'm in.
Right. So green is for people who were sexually abused under the age of 25. And then purple is for people who caused harm to someone under the age of 25, um, and are ready to take responsibility. And purple's a little bit, we're not an organization that tries to help people who are in danger or at risk of harming someone sexually to get into recovery. That's not what we do. So, people who join the Purple Circle are already in recovery in some way or not in danger of harming. And then they're there to really try to make amends, either with the community at large or with the particular person. We call those purple. And we don't interchange the word purple with offender because most offenders are not taking responsibility. So purple is an honored title to us because in recovery, no longer at risk of harming and ready to take responsibility. So that those are green and purple. And then orange are non-offending parents or caregivers or people who had power to prevent the harm at the time and didn't, either because they didn't know or they didn't know how or whatever. But those orange usually are non-offending parents. And then blue is loved ones without power. So they're usually siblings, adult children who weren't born yet, or spouses who weren't married into the family yet, or partners, like that. And so it's kind of those blue and orange are the more unique part of the system that you don't see in organizations usually. You see services for people who have caused harm. You see certainly services for people who were harmed, but you don't see anything trying to address the other people in the family. And a lot of times I'm green, you're green. A lot of times you hear adults who are green say, I don't even care about the person who harmed me. I just want my family to believe me, or, I just want someone to realize I don't want to sit by that person at Thanksgiving or whatever. So I do think the family, initially the person who causes harm in a lot of the systems is the one who causes the harm. But over time, the way the family responds is a secondary layer of harm that also goes unaddressed often.
Yeah, yeah. I think I use this metaphor of Jenga towers over and over again, probably in everything I do. It's kind of this metaphor of like how the psyche seems to me like it kind of comes together at the beginning of life, like the Jenga tower, if you've ever played that game at the beginning.
Hmm.
And then every turn you take a piece off and put it on the top, and the thing gets taller and more rickety. That when I think about what you're saying, I just think about all the ways that families go on doing things that take pieces out of that Jenga tower and put them on top. You got to live in a dream world. You find
Right.
out that you're prioritizing everything under the sun except your own reality.
You're right.
And here you are conditioning yourself for your childhood, your adolescence, your young adulthood into this bifurcated split state where
Right.
the real world, which is inside, and then the real world, which is outside, and never the twain shall meet. Mm,
Right. And I think that's true for people who are harmed, but I think it's true for everyone, all the other colors too.
yeah, right,
Mhm.
right. Things are going on
That
that
they're
you,
like really reinforcing a distortion, or an inability to face the reality of what's happening or happened, which just allows it to happen again in the next
yeah,
generation. Yeah.
yeah. Um, so tell me a little bit about like how I read in your book, Healing Together. I'll put a link to that as well. In your, I really was taken by the story that you told in there, or your account of like how you came across the healing circle thing, the healing circle dynamic. How did that, tell me a little bit about that. I would love to hear you just tell a little bit about like how that, the concept of the healing circle kind of entered your life and how you put that to use, in your own life, and how that kind of morphed into, or to what extent that kind of turned into hidden water or became the core of it, or
Oh yeah. Do you mean I don't remember the story you're referencing,
well,
but do
I
you mean about Kay Pranis or
the story that stuck, and I'm sorry if I'm distorting things.
no no.
Maybe I made up a story. I think I remember a story in your book about reading reading about reading about healing circles, and then like doing one in your kitchen or something, or like kind of getting people together and doing a healing
Yes.
circle,
Got
and
it.
feeling like I had, well, because I had this I've had the feeling that you had experienced some kind of, I only use the word magic because I don't know a better I don't know a better word for it, that you kind of did this healing circle for yourself or with the people that you're talking about, and then you kind of had this magical experience through that, or saw that it really did something, like alchemy or something was different at the end. That was the story that
Yeah,
stuck in my mind
right.
because it resonated
Okay.
with me.
Yeah, I think what you're talking about is the very first circle that we did. And part of it was that I was putting this together, sort of with this idea that my clients or the people that kept asking me to mediate needed something different. I tried to invent a bunch of processes, and it was all really being driven, at least consciously, by these all these people I knew who had been harmed and who were suffering from their family dynamics. And then I put them all together in this circle. Once we learned this circle process, there was probably, I don't know, seven, eight, nine people, all women that I had worked with or knew before for the most part, and all with a history of harm. And then I got the talking piece and I realized like, oh my God, I'm gonna have to talk about my own story. Not, it was like it wasn't until that moment had to open my mouth the first day, the first time, the first person,
Yeah.
um, and realize like, oh, this has to be about me. And that was like kind of amazing because a lot of stuff flooded back for me in that first circle. And while I had been in therapy, and it's not like I didn't remember, it was more like I had kind of set that aside, and now I was just doing it for other people. And
Yeah.
so when I grabbed the talking piece, and part of the thing is you share your own lived experience. You don't talk like you're lecturing a class. And so I suddenly was sort of face to face with my own harm in a totally different way. And I can talk a lot about why it was different now that I'm looking back on it. But at the time, it was definitely magic, like,
Yeah.
um, we went around and, there was people who were like, well, I don't want to use this talking piece, kind of dumb. Why do we do that? And, we sort of said, like, just trust the ancient wisdom here. And the talking piece really mattered. And everyone had just a really profound experience of shift in that circle. I mean, some got worse, but then got better because, something cracked and opened it all up. Um, but for me, having been in therapy, it's not like I couldn't regurgitate this information, but somehow sitting in a circle with all people who had been harmed opened my heart in a completely different way to feel compassion for my young self, um, in a way that I'm sure I approached my therapy with more stoicism and more like, okay, I'll let the little facts seep in, but I'm not going to feel them. And still, like I would say, it's hard to feel the pain of my own young life, but I can certainly feel the pain of everyone else's. And so, in that way, it became very life altering for all of us. Yeah, it was amazing. Is that the story you meant?
Yeah, that's it. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I'm so that must be a common experience.
Yeah, it's
That kind
massive.
of, yeah. I mean, I just think I was very taken with C.S. Lewis stories when I was a kid in Narnia. And there's a for people who don't who childhoods were robbed of C.S. Lewis. There's this a story in there of the wardrobe that is just a cupboard in the corner. And that's exactly how it seemed to me. I mean, I had a lot of stumbling blocks. I mean, that's one discovers in life how many stumbling blocks, all the stumbling blocks I put there myself. You know,
Mm,
no one else can put a stumbling block in front of me. I don't think. Only I can
right.
put them there. I'm not going to stumble over your stumbling blocks, only mine. And I put many stumbling blocks between me and living my life in the present. And there are a lot of things about hidden water that I choked on. Just like before I started, just like the words and the thing and the concept and all of that. I just don't come from a time and place when therapy was a thing, really. Um, but it was really like opening the door to that cupboard in Narnia and saying, I got to open this stupid thing. It's full of cobwebs. I don't like it. I don't like mothballs. I don't like wardrobes and cupboards. And then there it all is, this whole other world, which
Mm,
now seems like my actual life, you know.
wow, that's a beautiful metaphor for it. Yeah, I think some now that I've been through a million thousand circles in the last 12 years or whatever it's been, I I do think that some of the magic comes from this perspective shift, which I think is really beautifully articulated by saying Narnia. That is like such a dramatic perspective shift, but once you get it, it really shifts everything. And not everyone in circle gets it. They come in with like, I want to be validated. I'm the victim. Everyone else has to like, bend to my victimhood or, like that, well, what does my kid want me to do? I couldn't have stopped that harm. Like people sort of have this, rhetoric about it or this way of perceiving the world. And then when the shift happens, it's like profound. But unfortunately, not everyone gets it, but I would say the majority do. And that shift seems to be something like what you just said, is like, oh, nobody is preventing my healing, just me. Because nobody can do it for me. Nobody can say the right thing. Nobody can apologize in the right way. Nobody can, you know, uh, admit something or jump through some hoop or give me something. Like nobody can do it. Like I have to just sit with myself and hold space for other people is all the, is augmenting my ability to sit with myself in a lot of ways. But like taking responsibility and so many people in green so desperately want the people in their life to believe them, you know, who will never believe them. And so then they're trapped.
Yeah.
But it's like if you could sit in this circle, everyone believes you, everyone's holding it, everyone's got understands it, and nobody's like sort of looking down on you, telling you how to do this, but they believe you and they're holding it. And then suddenly it doesn't really matter if your mom believes you or if somebody doesn't want to talk, whatever. It's because you needed that, but you're not going to get it where it doesn't exist. Um, and it's like taking the outside, the false distorted idea that something on the outside is going to heal me and just like letting it be only I choose that and I shift that. And when I see it differently, I'm healed. And so, it is magic in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
And it's an ancient practice.
It's just the when you I look back, I mean at the every circle, when I look back, I think all that's happened here is some human beings sat around in this Brady Bunch arrangement of squares. I've never done one in person.
Hmm.
They just sat around in some kind of way and followed these rules, these policies, which, as a circle keeper, I feel like, you have, I mean, I feel the sense of like, it's on me and my fellow circle keeper to maintain this, to keep like a secure perimeter here for this thing. And remember, I can think of a circle which I felt there were some folks there who really wanted validation. You could just feel it. And it's like I have this phrase in my mind, like Japanese compassion, which times I practice Zen. So this phrase of Japanese compassion, which is sometimes getting smacked with a stick, you know,
Hmm.
like the thing that you want, this validation that you want, which everyone in this, which I feel I want to give it to them. And my codependent, my enmeshed self wants to fix them, uh, you know, uh, you want to give it to them, but the thing that's going to help them is not that. And if you do that, they've already done that. They're already living in the world of like repetition compulsion where you're finding ways to validate yourself a trillion times. A trillion and first time is not going to help any more than the other trillion did. No
Mhm.
one has your validation. They don't have it. They don't
Right.
have it. You have it.
Only you have it, right?
And being in a circle with some people that are clearly, I don't even know what the right word is, compassion, loving, there's some word for it, that are saying like, yes, I feel you. I believe me, I feel your clawing, your desperate clawing to feel better. This is what's going to make you feel better. Is if people know, is if nobody gives you what you're asking for.
Right. I know I was in a circle one time where, that often happens in the beginning of a circle. People are like, I need to know what other people think about me,
Yeah.
and it's all a big distraction from from going deeper in yourself, looking for it inside, like wanting to look for it outside, right? But so everything you just said, I agree. I was in a circle one time where this one woman just would not stop all 12 weeks. She's like, but I want to know what other people think about me. I want people to tell me that I'm right, or I want people to tell me they understand my pain, or, and then finally, in like one of the final weeks, one woman, a different woman was like, okay, fine, I'm going to tell you. Like, I get it. I've been through something very similar. I feel your pain. Every time you speak, I feel it. I have the same, it was like they were both harmed by siblings or something. I was also harmed by my sibling. I also have my parents who are negating and invalidating my experience and not believing me. And I really feel like what you've been through, she did it perfectly. I'm not doing it as well as she did.
Yeah.
Anyway, gets back to the woman who's been asking for it the whole time. She's like, that did not make me feel better. And I'm like,
Right.
that's right. It won't. Because it really, that is you're barking up the wrong tree kind of thing, Like, not that there's anything wrong with validation and being, talking to someone who says, I'm so sorry you've been through that. Like, there's nothing wrong with that. But in the circle, the like vortex we're going through requires not that. And so we get that I mean, a lot of people get that. It doesn't fill the hole. But, people do say, I'm sorry you've gone through that and feel for you, usually. And in here, it's like kind of being forced to give yourself validation, and the back of the wardrobe opens up.
Yeah. Yeah. It seems, you know, I don't know if this is related or not, but it came into my mind. There's a practice in the circle of not commenting, like not evaluating other people's stories
Mhm.
and not like editorializing on them. And I can think of a time when someone had a story, which if you wrote it out would be dramatically horrendous, in a way that would, like cinematically horrendous. And it was all anyone could do. And in fact, some people didn't. I mean, it, anyone would feel a strong pull to comment on it. Like, that's terrible. Some version of that.
Sure.
And I watched it happen in front of my face where that damaged this person's ability to connect with the rest of us, which is all they're there for. And they're never going to have a better audience than that, never in their life. I mean, unless they go to
Mhm.
another circle, there's never going to be another time. And now they come to this circle and like in that moment, to some extent, they were like, you know, not as belonging as they otherwise might have been because they've been separated out,
Yeah, right.
you know?
I know, and it also separates out the other people because, we certainly have a range of, degrees of abuse, and some people have had, ritualistic, group abuse. And some people have been touched as young people, and and once someone starts, you know, oh my God, that's so much worse than I had it. Now I also don't belong, you know?
Right.
And in fact, like so many people think that, outside people especially think, well, you didn't have it as bad as this person, and that person had it worse than this person. It's like, it doesn't work like that. It's like the impact on you is unique. It has messed up your life in your own unique way. And it doesn't really matter I mean, it matters, but it isn't like you're just filling up a degree, a cup full of trauma, and you can measure it, because it fractures a person in a unique way, and that person grapples with it in their own unique way. And because the trauma then brings more trauma and more trauma, and the symptoms bring more trauma and more trauma, like as it grows over time, it's different. So you could take two siblings who were twins, and had the exact same abuse. And then look at them 30 years later, they're going to be dramatically different because life plays on the trauma and changes it. And so there is this way in which, creating a hierarchy of trauma makes everyone not belong. And it's like it isn't a degree thing, it's a unique life experience impact. No two things are the same.
I have this like impression that there's just no kind of bright line that you can draw between what the plot events of anything that happened to someone sound like and like the effect it has on their psyche. There's
That's
just
right.
not.
No,
There's
there
not.
isn't. No.
And whatever shape your Jenga tower is, that's what shape it is.
Yeah, and it's changing. And, like the coping mechanisms that you employ to get through the initial trauma are their own set of traumas. They come with their
Yeah.
own set of traumas. So you became a drug addict and now you started prostituting, or you harmed someone else because of your harm, or, like there's all kinds of trauma that comes from your coping mechanisms. And
Yeah.
then the family you found yourself in, and the support you found yourself in when you first disclosed. Like there's so many factors that go into your degree of healing and your degree of fracturing that you really can't put your finger on it. Um, I recently was asked to do a training for these judges at the Court of Claims. I think it's called the Court of Claims, and they're the judges who are going to see all the CVA, CVA cases, which are the Child Victims Act. So they suspended the statute of limitations, so you could go back
Mm.
in that 18-month period in New York and go back and um, file a civil claim against the person who harmed you, even if the statute of limitations had run up. And the Court of Claims was going to hear all the cases of women who were harmed in prison by the guards. And, this was the exact issue they're asking. How can you tell the degree, like, how can you tell if someone's lying? Like, if they're crying on the stand, or they're angry on the stand, or they're shut down, I'm like, yeah, all that and more. Like, you can't really tell. You can't really measure and then put into a dollar amount, like how much damage was done. Because you might be the CEO of a company, and that is how your trauma played out, and you're on your fourth marriage, and you drink at yourself to sleep every night, but people are like, CEO of a company, or
Yeah.
you could be a drug addict, but plodding along and doing whatever, or homeless, or in a bad marriage, or alone, super alone, or you know whatever it is. So many infinite symptoms, the mental health issues that come, the physical issues that come, the relational conflict that comes. And, so it's like kind of sad. I'm saying to the judges, like, yeah, there's no measuring stick here. And if someone cried on the stand, or someone was totally flat and stoic, if they laughed, it doesn't matter. It indicates nothing, because all you're going to see from them on the stand is their coping mechanism, like
Yeah.
how they're going to deal with this. You're going to have to just judge as best you can on the damage to their life that it inflicted.
That's right.
And
That's
then,
what
of
you,
course, on top of it, women in prison are like something like 80% of them have been harmed as children sexually. It's just such a kaleidoscope of stuff that goes
yeah.
into it.
Yeah, and then have a lifetime of presenting some persona to the world in stressful situations. And
Yeah.
here they are in an incredibly stressful situation, you know. And I just know, the way my psyche works, if I were living in my conditioned responses, every last ounce of my psychic power would be going to don't reveal anything to anybody and say something
Hmm.
funny. At
Right.
no point can anyone know what I'm thinking.
Right.
They'll come 5 seconds before I pass over dead. You know,
Yeah.
you can't tell. You
Yeah,
can't.
you can. I mean, and people get through in their way. And like I always say, like, thank God for the coping mechanisms, whatever
Yeah.
they were, because how else could you get through if you didn't have them? I started drinking at 11 and I got sober at like 28 or something. And it's like, I get it. Now I'm 56. I look back on it. I'm like, I get that. And while that seemed bad to me in parts of my life, I look back on it and I think, thank God. Like it numbed me out. It got me friends at a young age. It's like whatever it was doing for me, there was trauma associated with it for sure, but also it got me through. And
Yeah.
so I kind of think my stoic self, I'm really good at shutting down and caretaking other people. Okay, but it's all good in some ways. I mean, it has an underbelly, but I'm here.
Yeah. I feel that. I feel that with the real sense of reality that like that's what you had to do. The person, the person, the psyche, the Jenga tower that I went into adulthood with was the one I had to have
Yeah.
to get, just to live, to be an octopus and to figure out like what do these people around me need? Everyone's a threat. The
Mhm.
betrayal is imminent. I don't know how long before it comes, but I know it's coming. And what do I do to keep them happy?
Right. I
And
get it.
I want to let come back to this, but I feel like I got ahead of myself a little bit. I would love to, if you just ran down, like, what does this circle look like actually for people that might be interested? Like, what's this magic? Like, what? Uh, uh, before you answer that, I'll say that I remember when I had the first call, probably with either you or maybe Taylor before the first circle I did, and I could not describe, I couldn't overstate how underwhelmed I was by whoever when someone described like what it is, like. Well, that's bogus. Like, when does the healing happen? But tell us, like, so what happens? How long are the circles, and
Yeah,
what's
I mean,
the work
I
about?
I appreciate you saying that. I was just in a meeting yesterday where some people were trying to advise us on something. They're like, you need to explain more about the circle. I'm like, you really can't. Like, you could talk for hours and no one would really
Yeah,
understand. It's like a thing you have to experience and that's it.
yeah,
But I will tell you, it's 12 weeks, meeting once a week for 90 minutes. It's 8 people, all of whom identify with that color. So there's no social worker, there's no therapist, I mean, there might be, but they're not there for that. And all 8 people are considered equal, and we're all there to do our own individual work. And so there are 2 people who are the facilitators, or we call them the keepers. Um, who have been through that circle before multiple times and trained, but they're there. We always say 70% participant, 30% keeper, because really you're running the curriculum, but you're really just showing up as a participant yourself. And then there's a curriculum. So the first week, we're sort of building the container, getting to know each other. The second week, we're building our guidelines and kind of trying to understand what would trigger different people and what would make them feel safe. The third week, we do the path to healing from harm, which is something that I created for the very first circle, and it's almost not changed since that first circle. It's kind of a my version of what Derek Brooks was talking about in his book, Beyond Harm. And then the rest of the weeks, one person takes a turn to share, like share that whatever we say, share the edge of your healing. So you don't have to tell your story of harm, but you want to talk about where's the rubber hitting the road right now for you. Like, I'm struggling with relationships, or I'm struggling with being truthful, or I'm having a hard time not caretaking everyone, or I'm isolating, how whatever it is that's impacting you. So that was kind of a green perspective, but lots of times the oranges are struggling with a very different thing. Like the non-offending parents are saying things like, how do I get my daughter to get over this? Or how do I get my son to start talking to me again? Or, like they kind of have their same rubber hits the road for them in different ways. Same with purple, same with blue. And so each person gets a chance to speak to that for extra time. And then we close. So that's the 12 weeks. Every individual circle is made up of 3 rounds. So we go around 3 times in order, and that's the 90 minutes. And so everyone gets to share 3 times and listen. And people are always say to me in the beginning, like, but I'm not going to have enough time to talk. I'm like, you're not going to get healed from talking. You're going to get healed from listening. And it's your turn to share to be known, that's your gift to everyone else. And when they're speaking, that's their gift to you. So 7 of 8, 7/8 of the circle, you know, you are listening. And I mean, one thing that I think is part of the magic too is like you see yourself reflected in other people's stories, even if they're dramatically different stories. And somehow that, like where in therapy you'd have to think of all those things yourself. Like there's 8 people reflecting back your experience in different ways, or not your experience, but it makes you hone in on what is yours and what isn't yours. Um, and so that's basically the way it is. And I see why you feel underwhelmed. But it is
Yeah.
something you have to go through to really understand.
Yeah, I mean, I would say to anybody that watches this and feels like and has a response, has resistance the way that I did of like this is some hogwash here. Like nothing is going to happen. I'm going to go and listen to a bunch of whining. I understand all that, and I could just say, I mean, you know, I Gen Xer from Oklahoma, raised by a 3 tour combat door gunner from Vietnam. Not that many people are going to be a whole lot more resistant than this guy to the kind of stuff that you just heard. And all I can say is it's an experience. It's an experience. And you
Yeah.
could think of any other thing that you've done in your life, which has been an experience, which when you told someone else about it, the phrase you just had to be there comes into it. It's an experience. You
Hmm.
know, I have a old school Jungian psychoanalyst, and that's also an experience. The experience
Sure.
of going there and having someone who's like an actual life coach. He doesn't tell me how to organize my closet like that, but he listens to the plot events that my mouth is describing. And then he listens to the stories that I'm telling myself about those plot events. And he points out where there's vast gulf between the stories I'm telling and the plot events.
Right.
And he draws my attention to it. And that's an experience,
Sure.
and you couldn't describe it. So that's all I can say about that is it's just an experience. It's like there's reasons why people use words alchemy and these kinds of things. You put a bunch of stuff in the beaker, you shake it up, and gold comes out the other side for many people,
Yeah,
for
for
many
many
people.
people that is the case. Um, and yeah, I appreciate you saying all that. And also it doesn't negate all those other experiences. Like, sometimes people come to circle and they're like, this is not for me. It's like, great, of course, then don't come. Like
Yeah.
there's no judgment, but that's part of what the alchemy is. It's like gonna hand to you the full reins of your life. Like if this isn't for you, you hate this and you want to leave, then you should. And there are people who drop out of circle and then call me months and months later and say that was the most healing thing I ever did. I went to circle, I was traumatized by everyone, and then I said I'm not going to do this, and you said do it, leave. Not leave like get out, but like empower yourself to make your best choice. And then saying no to it was somehow so empowering, like taking the reins of your life. And so I do think that the reason people can't heal from this is because they can, because there's a paradigm out there that says like you're alone in this,
Yeah.
and that nobody's coming to save you, or the only way to get better is someone comes and saves you, and then no one is. um yeah, I don't
This
know,
really,
again, it's like hard to put into words, isn't it?
yeah. There's something some, you know, close to maddening, to me about knowing how overwhelmingly common child sex abuse is. I would guess that the numbers that one hears, 1 in 6, 1 in 5, 1 in 4, whatever I would guess that those are significantly understated.
Sure,
I would
especially for men.
Yeah. Yeah. I would think it's way higher, way, way higher.
Right.
And you've got hordes of people out there living in isolation, living this bifurcated, split life, and with the degree of suffering that makes living your actual life untenable. You can't do
Hmm.
it while you're maintaining all this. You got
Right.
half your life force going to maintaining this persona and half to tending this damaged Jenga tower that's on the floor, which
Yeah.
is why, I mean, I say in every video, I'm a child sex abuse survivor. As an adult, I live with borderline personality disorder and I'm a recovering addict and bulimic. Wouldn't matter if I was talking about how to make waffles. I would say that
Mhm.
because
Yeah.
all these things, many people are. And you see, I feel like I've had the impression of seeing certain kind of personality traits in people in circles. And now, kind of, I can't read anyone's mind, but having a real clear sense walking down the street, and this is probably maybe something you share as a social worker, of like people having neon signs. They may as well have a neon sign hung around their neck. You
Hmm.
know, this
Yeah.
person, this is a war zone kid. To use my language, of someone whose psyche came together in the way that it had to in an environment that was more like a guerrilla war against it and less like a nursery. Like that's a
Right.
war zone kid.
Yeah.
I
I know
wonder,
those kids.
yeah,
Those kids
right.
that are really adults. Yeah.
Yeah, us.
Hmm.
You and
Right.
I, right. I mean, not to put,
But like I do a lot of speaking, and I almost, never get out of a speaking, room where someone doesn't come up and disclose to me.
yeah,
Even, I've had many, many people say to me, "You're the first person I've ever told." And I'm basically a stranger, which sometimes is easier to tell a stranger, but and I think there's a lot of people who describe to me child sexual abuse, but just tell it to me in this way that's like blaming themselves, you know,
yeah,
and it's like they haven't sort of flipped that script yet. And imagine, when I had TMJ, that is like your jaw locks,
yeah,
and I was in high school, I think. And my mom took me to the doctor, and the doctor, whatever, said TMJ, blah, blah, blah. And then he said, "I'm sorry to do this, but I have to ask you these questions because they're doing this study and they're making us do this. And I'm sure the answer is no, but have you ever been sexually abused?" I was like, and my mom was sitting right there, and I was just shocked that he asked me like in this way that was, "I'm sure this isn't the case, but, you know, I mean, who would say yes?" I said no, of course. So
yeah,
then I've always thought about that study, like how many people have been sexually abused as children and have this TMJ. It's like whatever that number is, it's higher because they're not asking a question in a way that someone would answer. Not it's not safe
yeah. Right,
because the
right.
assumption is that people aren't being harmed. Or
Every
like
so
this
often,
white Midwestern kid with her mom, definitely not.
every so often, someone gets picked up in a white van by stranger danger.
Yeah,
You know,
right.
like that narrative,
Exactly.
right?
Yeah.
Well, then there's the other 95%. Not to minimize people that had
Right. No,
that
not to
same or harm
minimize, but
experience.
they're the very, very small minority. Yeah.
Yeah, the overwhelming majority, the harmed by someone that they know, immediate family members.
Right. I know
Um,
the statistic I always share because I think it's just stunning is 88% of cases will never be reported to an authority. You know, but when I move around in, the CSA world of social work, almost all programs are targeted at the 12% that got reported to the authorities. And it's like 88% never ever enter the system. And I understand why they don't. I wouldn't want to have been in the system.
yeah,
I wouldn't have told a teacher because I wouldn't have wanted the whole thing to blow up. You want to maintain control of that narrative and of your life. And I know that the system does save people, but it isn't that simple. They could
Yeah.
save you, pull you out of your house and put you in foster care where you're harmed even more. Like you don't know what's happening,
Yeah.
and so I get why people don't report it, but I don't, so many people then are caught with that sort of white van story, that, oh, these are this kind of person,
Yeah.
and the Larry Nassars and the whatever Bill Cosbys of the world, and it's like really not that mostly.
It's Uncle Bob and Aunt Sue
Exactly.
is who it
And
is.
your
And
same
your
age
grandfather
neighbor,
and your
or
sibling.
your
Yeah.
best friend's brother, older brother, or your female cousin, like that.
Yeah. I wrote a screenplay once about the about this sort of thing, and someone that read it um said, "Well, Ben, this would never happen. You would call why no one called DCF, whatever they call it. No one called
Yeah.
Child Protective Services, and then they would fix it." Like, is that what happens?
I know,
Is
but
that what
that,
happens? Is that
yeah,
Lord of the
that is
Rings?
not what happens. But that is a very common, like again, this rescue fantasy that,
Yeah.
like, oh, I just called and ta-da, somebody swooped in and made it all better, when that is not even kind of the reality.
Or
Not
someone
even
poked
kind
around
of.
and asked a few questions, and then things got 1,000 times worse. How about that?
Exactly.
How about
That's
that?
exactly it. And that most cases are unfounded. So now it's like, I mean, I don't begrudge people calling Child Protective Services in the case where it's warranted and such, but
Right.
it isn't, I always say to people, like we've been training these, say in our Safer Adult Prevention program, we're training these counselors in a school, and it's like calling Child Protective Services, you might be a mandatory reporter, but that is not the end of your job there. Like, because who knows what they're going to do with it. You're going to have to still hold this family, hold this kid, like be there, because no matter what they do, which might be nothing, this
Yeah.
child needs a lot of support, and this family needs a lot of support to do the right thing.
I'm looking at the time here, and let me I'm going to ask you something I'm really curious about. You had this overwhelming volume of experience with humanity, and I have the impression that you probably do a staggering number of circles yourself every session. I'm really curious, as a human being, how your experience of humanity has been changed by all of this, and how your views on us as human creatures and the human psyche, and what how's that for you, seeing all your fellow human creatures in all these circles over all these years?
Mhm.
Anything changed or surprising to you, or
Yeah,
lay
that's a
some
really deep question,
lay
Ben.
some
Thank
wisdom
you
on me,
for asking it.
Elizabeth? Lay some
I I
experience on me.
I think it's improved my perspective on humanity. I mean, it's done a lot of things. One thing is my world got smaller, not bigger, even though I must meet 1,000 new people, and I mean that literally every
Mhm.
year. But I, in a lot of ways, like I like the people who have had adverse experiences. Like I like those people. Those are my people. And
Yeah.
and the people that have had to struggle to stay upright are my people. And they're interesting, they're resilient, they're compassionate, they're deeply wise. As people who have had to come through something, um and still show up, and the keepers at Hidden Water, the people who went through the circle for their own healing and then decided to come back and train to hold it for others. That's still their work that they're doing, but they're holding it for other people. I mean, those people are the most amazing. Just like they want to do this for someone else, and that is a next level of healing, I think. And Well, we do have a small number of people who come and hate it and, rail against it and nobody validated me, I'm out, There's vast majority come through and want to be there for the people in their circle.
Yeah.
And so it taught me that the capacity for deep compassion, almost goes hand in hand with having had hard experiences in your life and having come through them. Seems to me that those are the people with the most compassion and the deepest wisdom. And then like the antithesis of the social media world. It's like actually getting into a small community of people and, instead of being 1,000 million people wide and 1 inch deep, you have these 8 people and you just go so deep with them, that like a lot of people say the only people who really know me are the people from my circle who I just met 12 weeks ago, you know? And like that
Who I
kind
might
of
not know what
depth.
time zone they live in.
Yeah, right. I don't know their last name, don't know their, maybe it's even an alias, like, and yet there's such deep sharing because you are going so deep into yourself to share. You're not sharing to impress. You're sharing because that's what's true for you in that day, and people are just holding it without judgment. And it does occur to me that like that's what's required is a smaller system that goes deeper rather than this like huge system that's like shallow. That we're losing something there. And
Yeah.
so I do feel like even though it's true I've been through 1,000 million circles, it seems, I sit in circle every day. um you know in that moment, those are the deep, those are really deep connections that I'm having. And um it's so meaningful and it changes my life every single time that I go through a 12-week circle. It's like, and will I remember everyone I've ever been in circles? No way, I won't, I can't. But it did impact me in a way that like my system will be changed forever. And it
Yeah.
seems like, that type of encounter with humanity really shows you the best side of it,
Yeah.
my sense. How about you? You feel that way?
Yeah. Definitely. I got some idea that we will only take our psyches apart as much as we have to, you know, and a lot of folks in circles have to take them apart pretty, you know, down to the bare wood, I mean, I've known my mother all my life. There's not a before time.
Right.
you know so that's how much you have to take apart to find yourself and put it together. I want to i want to be sure to ask you this question before we run out of time, if it's not impertinent, whatever way you feel like answering it. What's the edge of your healing these days? That's a question that we ask in the circle. I asked that because I couldn't, with the first circle or two I did, I was a big vomiting mess of just like, bleh. I wouldn't have known what edge of my heel. And now I would have an answer to that. It's about watching my BPD conditioning come to life with my co-keepers. In the last couple of circles I have, that's it. I lose it. I split. I go bananas. I'm like writing emails. I'm having to sign off after the meetings because nothing out of my mouth is going to be good until the next day. And these are people that I deeply care about.
Yeah,
And I
I
watch it
get you.
happen in my head. But
I
what,
get you. Right, but having the consciousness of the edge of your healing, that's the
yeah.
point.
So what's that
I
like for
think
you
for
these days?
me, it's like lately anyway, it's been giving my self permission to stop, like check out, like
Mhm.
not be the one to jump into the fray or not raise my hand for that or not prioritize everybody else's, and I still probably spend 90% of my time doing that, but, give like just the way I was conditioned growing up. It's like if you're sitting down, you're going to get attacked. Like you are vulnerable. You can't watch TV. You can't, like it's just, there was just nowhere to relax kind of thing. And just even the judgment that would get heaped on you if you were just chilling. And so for me, it's really hard for me to allow myself because it's not relaxing. Like if I'm doing nothing, I'm panicking. And so if I'm not like vigilantly watching what everyone else is doing, I'm panicking. And so that's really the edge. It's been the edge for probably my whole life, but it's really like starting to come together now where I'm giving myself more permission to just in the middle of the day take an hour and go for a walk or go sit by the fire or whatever. And try not to feel guilty and try not to feel afraid. You know. So
I hope, I hope at some point, at points in your life, you are aware of the overwhelming tsunami of goodness and grace and compassion that you have unleashed in the world through Hidden Water and the tons of suffering that what you've done with Hidden Water has helped to alleviate. I hope that you can experience that sometimes. It's wildly true. I mean, it's been a life-altering experience for me. I feel like cheating. I get to do two of these a year, and all I have to do is like fire up a spreadsheet and like deal with the chat box and sometimes get driven crazy by Zoom.
Yeah, no, I've really thank you, but I maybe opened the door, but it's like all the keepers are the ones doing the work. And they're doing it for themselves and they're doing it for the people in their circle and everyone that they know and every ring that goes out from there. The keepers are really and I'm a keeper too, but like the
Yeah.
churners of this, like if they weren't showing up, we wouldn't have this. And it is it's exponential for sure, and they come with their compassion and then they create more compassion, and it really is magic.
Yeah.
Yeah, and thank you for stepping in and doing that hard work and holding that space.
Well, it's a real pleasure. It's a
Yeah.
real pleasure to know that there is an edge of healing and that it moves and changes. And I spend a lot of time these days living my life, in the present moment, which I was not true a few years ago. It was just mired in coping and, you know, untended to damage.
Mm.
It's just not true anymore.
I'm so
And
glad.
I want to
You're
be
doing such amazing work. I really really like everything you're up to these days. But I will just say, if you don't mind me revealing something from our circle, I used
please
to,
do.
every time we went into circle together, you would say something, some phrase, or something that made me laugh out loud every single time. I'm like, that could be the title of a book. That could be a title of a book. um, and one thing people I don't think realize about these circles is sometimes they're funny. Sometimes they're
Yeah.
light. Sometimes there's a connection that just lightens the spirit. And I always really appreciated your turn of phrase. It was so good.
Well, thank you. Thank you,
Um,
Elizabeth. And let me be mindful of your time and turn you loose. Thank you. Thanks for keeping me company on the trail to the Western Lands. And
yeah.
it's a good time. It's a good day, and we got in a few miles together.
Yeah.
Elizabeth, thank you
Thanks
very
so
much.
much, Ben. I really appreciate it. We'll
And
talk
I'm
soon.
looking forward. I'm looking forward to making some welcome calls in a few weeks, and we have
Yeah.
a circle starting in toward the end of February.
Yep, we do.
Can't wait.
We're about to start it all again. So it's good.
All right, Sally
All
Forth.
right. Thanks,
Take
Ben.
care. Live
All
long
right.
and
Have a good
prosper.
night.
Have a good
Bye.
night, Elizabeth. Bye.